There we are. All right, very good. Thank you very much. So howdy, everybody. My name is Alex Rotenberry, and I just wanted to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm the Complete and Green Streets Planner here at the Mid-America Regional Council, and we want to once again welcome you to the Pathways to Vision Zero Summit. We're excited to be hosting this summit in an effort to encourage our community to reduce traffic, crash fatalities, and serious injuries down to zero. So as a reminder for everybody, we would like to encourage you to keep your cameras on so that our speakers can feel like they're talking to people and not a blank screen like they actually are. And also, but please make sure to keep your mics off, and I appreciate that during the presentation at least. We invite you to type any questions into the chat throughout the presentation, and I'll read them to our presenters at the end of the Q&A time. All right, and so I guess I need to share my screen, actually, is what I need to be doing. It's been a day so far, am I right? Let's go ahead and just do this then. There we go. So, a little out of sorts today. Okay, so the second slide. So I just want to take a quick moment to recognize our summit planning partners represented here. So we want to give a shout out and big thanks to all those organizations that help make this, this series possible. So before we get into this session, we wanted to invite local area jurisdictions and counties of all sizes and populations, et cetera, to take the lessons that they're learning here at the Pathways to Vision Zero Summit and to put them into action in your communities. So Mark will be hosting a free two-part workshop with subject matter experts that is designed to help bring a policy into place and an initial plan to help make streets safe for everyone. So please make sure to save the dates for December the 4th and the 8th if you're interested. And let me see if I can put the link to the sign up in the chat box for y'all. And so again, it's free, and we're looking for folks to sign up. So very cool. So we are very excited to continue our summit series with our next session, which is entitled The Life Cycle of Making Cities Safer for Active Transportation. And our presenters today are Laura Steele. And Laura is a director of education at Bike Walk KC and a council member for the city of Westwood, Kansas. Laura oversees Bike Walk KC's educational team and works to ensure program sustainability through cultivating strong relationships with numerous community organizations, school districts, public health-focused work groups, and others across the Kansas City Metro. She is also involved with the Women Bike KC initiative and coordinates the KC Women's Bike Summit and the Greater KC Safe Routes to School Summit. And our other speaker is Sarah Copeland, Community Development Director at the City of North Kansas City. In her role, Sarah manages long-range planning and redevelopment. Past projects include North Kansas City's Armour Road Complete Streets Plan, which included a demonstration project that won a 2018 Missouri Municipal League Innovation Award, and construction of the Diamond Parkway Cycle Track, the first fully protected cycle track in the KC metro area, which was named Bike Walk KC's 2018 Bike Ped Project of the Year. Sarah's background includes 20 years of urban planning experience in both the public and private sectors. She holds a bachelor's and master's degrees in city planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So very cool. Warm welcome to both of our speakers today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I believe Laura is up first. So look forward to her presentation.
All right. Thank you, Alex and the Mark Destination Safe Work Group for the invitation to speak today. As you can tell from our presentation description and what Alex briefly mentioned at the top of the meeting, both Sarah and I are going to highlight a couple of complete streets projects that are at different stages of their existence, what we've learned from these projects, and how this has shaped our strategies moving forward with future complete streets opportunities. So I'd like to start off with a little bit about me. I am the Director of Education at Bike Walk KC. If you're not familiar with this organization, we are the region's most comprehensive active transportation nonprofit. We're 10 years old, member supported, and provide a wide array of services, including advocacy, community planning, maintaining and operating the Ride KC bike share program, as well as operating some of the country's largest youth and adult education programs. Our mission is to redefine our streets as places for people to build a culture of active living. I've worked at Bike Walk KC since 2014. I started out as a part-time youth instructor teaching bicycle lessons and earn a bike programs. I moved to an outreach coordinator position. Then in 2018, transitioned to program manager spot, and finally arrived at my director of education post in 2019. Also in 2019, my family and I moved to Westwood, Kansas. 3 weeks later, after having been persuaded by a sitting council member, I was down in Olathe at the Johnson County election office signing up to run for city council. A huge personal motivator for doing this was the fact that as the mother of 2 young kids, I wanted to provide my family with an example of service that could also have a lasting impact on the community in which we lived. I was elected in November and sworn in January of this year. I have a personal passion for physical activity. I commute by bicycle as much as possible. I learned to ride from my mom and have early memories of walking to school with her. One reason why we chose to move to the Westwood area was its relatively close proximity to basically everything, but primarily because my kids could walk to school. So as the crow flies, we live about 1/3 of a mile from the school. Walking or riding, it's a little over 1/2 mile. It's a great way for us to see our neighbors, say hi to passing dog walkers, keep an eye on changing holiday decorations, and add some movement to our day. Rarely do we ever walk in silence, as there's always something to see or someone to talk to that generates discussion. Based on the sheer number of neighbors and friends we see walking daily, as well as the number of bicycles crowding the bike rack, having the school within a manageable walking, riding distance is also a positive factor for other families in the neighborhood. Making sure that these streets stay safe, not only for my family, but for the entire community, has caused my personal and professional worlds to collide. So I'm going to make an assumption. Most of us know about complete streets and what a project can entail. As I've mentioned, Sarah and I have tailored our presentations to talk about the life cycle of a project, and I want to show this slide that marks the major milestones in the process. As I move further into my presentation, I will first cover the development of a complete streets project in Westwood, Kansas, and second, the life cycle of a complete streets policy there. This opportunity allows me to present to colleagues across the region. I wanted to just briefly localize Westwood and our project within the metro. Westwood is located at the very northeastern tip of Johnson County. Neighbors to the north are Wyandotte County and the Rosedale community. Neighbors to the east are Jackson County in Kansas City, Missouri. Our major delineating streets are 47th Avenue to the north, State Line to the east, Shawnee Mission Parkway to the south, and Mission Road to the west. Our 47th Street Complete Streets project area is noted in the inset at the top. This location within the metro serves us well on many different levels. We are able to lead, learn, and innovate from our county and municipal neighbors and partnerships. So next is a brief overview of some milestones that the 47th Street Complete Street project has passed. This process obviously started before I was a Westwood resident, and I'm only going to cover about a 20-year time span. In 1997, Westwood adopts a comprehensive plan update that incorporates pedestrian improvement considerations specifically along 47th Street. Joe's Kansas City, also called Oklahoma Joe's Barbecue, also opens this year. In 2000, the 47th and Mission Road Corridor Concept Plan is created. One of the identified goals that the plan outlines is improved pedestrian linkages and safety throughout the corridor. In 2002, Westwood, Roland Park, and Unified Government of Wyandotte County adopted an interlocal agreement, and the 47th Street Committee is formed. Placemaking efforts progressed in 2005, with 47th Street undergoing some rehab work and decorative intersections were installed. In 2007, the 47th redevelopment study was completed. The purpose of this study was to develop a feasible market-oriented plan for the 47th Street and Mission Road intersection area. In 2013, Walmart Neighborhood Market opens, as well as the Taco Republic restaurant. 2015, the Northwood Shopping Center is renovated. In 2016, Woodside Village opened. This is a housing and retail mixed-use development located at the intersection of 47th Street and Rainbow Boulevard. So that's the east end of this corridor. It attracts a lot of young professionals and provides extra shopping and service choices to residents in the area. The Rosedale Master Plan and Traffic Study is also completed this year. It is explicitly noted within that improving the roadway design of 47th Street is an important part of continuing the forward momentum of this area. The design of the roadway has a big effect on the safety, walkability, and overall feel of the 47th Avenue district. 2017 was the adoption of the Westwood Comp Plan update, and in 2 out of 3 plan themes, active living by design is called out, and opportunities supporting resident demand for increased walkability, bikeability, and multimodal transportation choices are highlighted throughout. This same year, Westwood submitted a MARC Planning Sustainable Places application with the 47th Street Complete Street Project application and was selected for funding. 2018, KDOT funding for Complete Streets construction was awarded. 2019, Roland Park, Westwood, and the Unified Government joined forces with the business community to host the first annual 47 Foodie Fest. This event celebrates area businesses and kicked off the branding for the 47. 2020, Westwood Complete Streets policy was adopted by a unanimous council vote. The preliminary striping project to demonstrate Complete Streets functionality in corridor was completed. The second MARC PSP application was accepted for community engagement for 47th Place Complete Street project. So what this last 20 years has shown us is that this corridor is growing up. It's finding a unique identity, it's making friends, businesses are wanting to develop here, and more families are looking to call this area home. Both the surrounding municipalities and neighborhoods have spoken out regarding the distinct character they want this corridor to embody, and a prominent theme stated therein is walkability, bikeability, and the supportive infrastructure to do it safely. What we're looking at here is 3 spots along 47th Street, pre-road diet. This stretch of 47th Street between Mission Road and Rainbow Boulevard had been identified as a good candidate for a lane reduction, with the addition of a bike lane in each direction, 2 pedestrian crossing improvements, as well as resituating the bus stop on the Westwood side. This suggested reconfiguration will expand affordable, accessible, multimodal transportation options in order to better connect residents and visitors to homes, jobs, and services. These images show the newly completed stripe-only project. You can see the dedicated center turn lane, bike lanes, and one of the 2 improved crosswalks. In October of 2020, the Westwood City Council confirmed a selection committee's choice for a design consultant as we move closer to the actual permanent updates. As of this time, the 47th Street Complete Streets project is in an evaluation stage. Our design consultant will help us understand what is working with the stripe-only project, gather public feedback, and offer design options for the next step of this project. For this set of lessons learned, I thought it would be best to reach out to John Sullivan, my public works director here in Westwood, Kansas, and get his take on what was striking to him about this project. He gave me a ton of thoughts, and I've narrowed them down to 4. So top of his list was learning the definition of a complete street and expanding on the understanding of what a street has been and what it can be. Next, this is a very big project for the city of Westwood. Our unified government neighbors have multiple projects on this scale and bigger that can very easily distract resources or pull priority from this area. What will maintain the momentum is a persistent partnership with the Rosedale community and the unified government, as well as proof that this project will bring social and economic vitality to the neighborhoods on both sides of the county line. The third lesson learned is that human behavior is out of our control, but not the features of the built environment. Redesigning the features of this corridor to encourage and direct safer user behavior will hopefully be a model for the other streets in and around our community. Finally, the cost involved with any capital improvement project is something that can't be ignored. It wasn't truly a lesson learned for John, as he is a 40-some-year veteran of this work. However, I think this lesson comes down more to the concept that once your eyes are open to the possibilities, the balance of affordability is always a limiting factor. My next set of slides will cover the life cycle of the Westwood Complete Streets policy. So in November 2019, I won my election campaign to Westwood City Council. Shortly thereafter, I met with the mayor-elect to preview personal projects that I was interested to champion. The adoption of a strong Complete Streets ordinance was top of that list. In February 2020, there was a council work session on the topic of extracurricular projects that council members were interested to work on. At that time, I presented a Complete Streets template ordinance that was drafted by Michael Kelly from Bike Walk KC. March 2020, the world pandemic feels like it officially hits the metro and everything shuts down. At this time, we also undergo the process of hiring a new city clerk. In August of 2020, there was a council work session to discuss the merits of adoption of a Complete Streets framework as an ordinance versus a policy versus a resolution. This was also a chance for other council members to ask questions or suggest further edits with the current framework. Finally, in October of 2020, with 5-0 unanimous vote, the Westwood City Council adopts a Complete Streets policy. Our Complete Streets policy is within the implementation stage. Currently, my Public Works Committee is working on the development of a diverse focus group to help us create a complete street plan for the streets that are not explicitly called out in the latest comprehensive plan. In my first year as a council member in the midst of a pandemic, working with a group of people I'd never worked with previously, as well as the changing of the guard of our city clerk, I had a lot of lessons learned, and I've narrowed my list down to my top 3 big insights. So as I started my work, I was unsure of my relationship to staff and theirs to me. There's no formal onboarding process yet for new council members, so I didn't understand how to approach and make the most of the wonderful people who serve our city day in and day out. If I had things to do all over again, Public Works Director and City Clerk would have been my first set of people to approach with this policy. When presenting the Complete Streets template to my fellow council members and mayor, I wished I had known to have pulled the weeds from the flowers. In other words, I would have presented the council with the intent and vision of the policy while working with staff on the implementation, best practices, and performance measure sections. Lastly, I've read our comprehensive plan from cover to cover over and over again. Combined with the feedback from residents I had gathered from my time campaigning, I felt like I had a fairly good understanding of the community's appetite for something like a Complete Streets policy. I was able to use those insights to further support my case with both staff and council that this policy was not intended to be a rigid or prescriptive set of procedures for street projects, but an intentional accountability tool to reflect the community's desire for a walkable and bikeable neighborhood. So with that, I thank you for your time. Please put your questions in the chat and I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Laura. Hope I do this correctly. You should all see the 5 stages of the life cycle that we've defined here. In talking about our Armour Road Complete Street Plan, I have to first start with North Kansas City. If you're not familiar with North Kansas City, we are immediately north of downtown KCMO across the Missouri River. We're a pretty compact and built out community. And Armour Road is one of our main east-west corridors through town. So we get a lot of people who drive Armour Road every day, not just to get to destinations in North Kansas City, but also to get from further north, south into downtown Kansas City, Missouri. This is Armour Road in downtown North Kansas City. When people think of North Kansas City, this is often what they think of. It's a 3-lane roadway with on-street parking. It's very walkable. We have lots of restaurants and some smaller shops and offices, mature trees. People love to walk in this area. And we have a lot of pedestrians in this area, which is great. This is the heart of North Kansas City. But on the east side, this is the same roadway. It's 7 lanes, lots of speeding, fewer pedestrians and bicyclists. So as we looked at this roadway, starting about 5 years ago, one of the main thoughts, at least in my mind, was this is a lot of pavement. And it's a lot of pavement that we don't necessarily need to support vehicle traffic. So as we were updating our master plan, a comprehensive master plan 5 years ago, and Armour Road was starting to emerge more and more as a barrier between two halves of North Kansas City. 95% of our residents live north of Armour Road, and most of our commercial and industrial development is south of Armour Road. But as we looked to the future of redevelopment around downtown, we knew more people were going to be living south of Armour Road. And we wanted people to feel like they could walk across that street to get from one destination to another, whether that was getting from their house to Dairy Queen to get an ice cream cone, or getting from new residential development on the south side to Dag Park in our really popular spray ground or the public library. We wanted more people to feel like that wasn't a barrier, it was a corridor that connected our community. And this really came out as we were moving through the plan. We asked people, where do you cross the street? And the main places they crossed are Swift and Iron and Howell. Well, what's the same about all of those places? They're all signalized intersections. So there was a place you could go and you knew the traffic was going to stop and give you an opportunity to cross the street. But we also asked, well, where do you want to cross Armour Road? People wanted to use the unsignalized intersections as well. So we knew that we had some safety concerns to address in looking at our complete street plan. And that was, one of the top goals for the community. Safety and economic development was the other one. They wanted this corridor to be a vibrant part of the community. So taking all of those directions that we received from community engagement really helped us to define the design for this corridor. And we were able to pilot this in a one-day pop-up demonstration project where we put parking protected bike lanes out. We put in a parklet and we showed people what we were planning. The decorative crosswalk was really fun to construct and install. And it allowed us to show people a vision for that corridor that wasn't just a lot of pavement. This complete street project is really known for its bike lanes, I think at this point, but it's really not just about the bike lanes. We were also looking at how do we add crosswalk improvements that are beautiful as well as functional. How do we add more community space along this corridor? What are some ways that we can include more wayfinding and also improve transit along the corridor? We do have one main bus route that runs down Armour Road. And so we wanted, long-term, that to be more convenient and useful as well. So we plan this corridor up into 3 zones. The commercial zone is closer to the interstate where we have buffered bike lanes, better signage for our truck routes. Trucks are supposed to turn off Armour Road if they're going westbound when they get to Lynn. Better crossings for people along this section. The transition zone closer to downtown, we transitioned to a parking protected bike lane, mid-block crossings and refuges for pedestrians, more street trees. We have a floating bus stop that was planned for this area, and then a downtown section that continue some of these improvements into downtown. So that was the plan. When we got to implementation and started construction, we planned for this to be 4 phases of construction with a larger first phase to get the bike lanes completely installed. And this is looking in the transition zone. When construction was complete, you can see the parking protected bike lane. We have the mid-block crossing with the pedestrian refuge island. This section is looking east, so you have the YMCA to your left, and that brick building is our post office, or the YMCA is to the right. The brick building to the left is the post office. This really looked a lot like we had planned, so we were really pleased with how this project came out. This is the intersection of Armour and Iron Street. So because we broke the project up into several phases, we really concentrated in phase 1 on making Iron the showcase intersection, so you could see everything that was going to come further in other parts of the plan here at Iron Street. So the decorative crosswalks, these were so well received when we did our community engagement that we knew we had to include the decorative crosswalks in this first phase. So we were really pleased with how these came out. And then you can also see the islands there, and the bike lane with the dash lines continuing through the intersection. And here's a street level view of what that looked like. Again, we were so happy with how this implementation went. The construction was completed on schedule. The bid was under our budget. Things seemed going really well. So what happened next? We started.
Sarah, you've accidentally muted yourself.
I don't know how I did that.
Yeah, it's a mystery. You're back. We can't see your, we can see there. Yep, we're good.
We're good. Okay. So we started hearing complaints before this project was even finished with construction. And considering that as we moved through the planning process, everything seemed to be very well received, in some ways, the complaints were a real surprise. And we received complaints from residents of North Kansas City, but also a lot from people who were driving through Armour Road to get from one place to another. And so hadn't been a target of our earlier community engagement. But it was, to be honest, it was a really difficult fall of 2019 to deal with all of this. Previously, if I was sitting at my office at my desk and the phone rang, I would answer my phone. I started screening my calls because it was just hard. So the 2 pictures here are from the October of 2019. Our city council held a town hall just to hear people's feedback about phase 1 of the project. And it was a packed council chambers. We listened to 3 hours of testimony from people and public comment about how they felt about the project. And those 2 written comments are actually comments that were left as part of our citizen satisfaction survey earlier in 2020. We had quite a split of comments left in our citizen satisfaction survey, both people who liked the project and people who really hated it. So it was a struggle last, late summer, fall, winter, just to figure out what comes next. The city council really deliberated what they should do in continuing the project. There was a lot of discussion about whether we should remove these improvements, and what is the next step for Armour Road. So the interesting thing about thinking about a life cycle of projects is that really changed the evaluation part of this life cycle. We had always planned to do bike counts as part of our evaluation of this project. we had done counts well, we'd done a complete traffic count, including bikes and pedestrians, before we started construction of Armour Road, so that we could use as a baseline for bicycle counts. Dissatisfaction forced us to do more evaluation than we had planned with just doing traffic counts. So for Armour Road, we had done initial counts in May of 2019. In 2020, when we repeated those, we ended up not being able to do them until July. So it's a kind of not a perfect year over year comparison, especially because it was hot when we did these. But we did see increases in our bicycle traffic along Armour Road. This shows the snapshot at Armour and Iron, our showcase intersection. But we also saw increased bicycle traffic in other places around the community. We saw a decrease in vehicle traffic, probably, not probably, because of the pandemic. But we knew from these counts that people were still out and about on their bikes, which was good to see. We, as part of our expanded evaluation of the project, we also looked at citation data. Now, I will acknowledge that there's a lot that goes into whether the police department issues a citation. But that said, we saw a definite decrease in citations, both for trucks who were on Armour Road and not obeying the truck route. So this would be trucks between Lynch Street and Burlington. There's not supposed to be any truck traffic. And one of our goals as part of our complete street plan was to use design to encourage trucks to turn where they were supposed to, make it look less inviting to truck traffic. And we also looked at speeding tickets. Those were after our construction. So that gave us an idea that we were making some improvements in this area. And then we didn't have great speed comparison pre and post construction. Speed data that we did have after the improvements were done, this chart shows Knox Street, which is in our transition zone, and Fayette Street, which is the boundary between the transition zone and our downtown area. And generally speaking, speeds are, it's all 25 miles an hour, but speeds are slower closer to downtown. There are fewer people speeding closer to downtown. So what we take from this is that where we have more complete street improvements being installed, we are seeing slower speeds, people who are closer to driving the speed limit, and less really extreme speeding happening where we've done more improvements. So we also took that as an indication that we were doing the right thing to make this corridor safer overall. And then crashes, we have had fatality crashes involving pedestrians on Armour Road, not a lot. It is generally a pretty safe corridor, but we were able, in comparison before construction, after construction, to document that there were fewer injury crashes and also slightly fewer property damage only crashes along the corridor. So lots of improvements in a Vision Zero way, and making the complete street improvements along Armour Road. So we held a second follow-up town hall meeting virtually in September and presented all of this data, and council directed us, instead of taking the project out, to look at a list of additional improvements to make the corridor and the project even better. So we're currently working with our engineer on alternatives for making those adjustments, and we'll be presenting those on December 15th to determine next steps for adjustments and for the additional phases of this project that are still not yet constructed. So looking at some lessons learned for this project, I would say one is to define the timeline. We included some things in our phase 1 project that were intended to be temporary. And, it's different people have different definitions of what temporary means. And so some of the things that we intended to last maybe a year or two, there were community members who thought they shouldn't have been up there for more than a few months. So defining what the real timeline is, I think, is really important. The second is to anticipate conflict, which we definitely did not do. And I don't think even if we had anticipated some conflict over the road diet portions of this project, I don't think we could have anticipated how vociferous the conflict ended up being. I think being better prepared for conflict around this kind of project would serve communities who are doing something like this better. And the third is to evaluate progress and do more evaluation than you think you need to. Our project really benefited from doing the additional evaluation that we were pushed into doing. It's great, I'm glad that we were planning to do the traffic counts that we did, but the additional evaluation of speeds and crash data really benefited everyone because we were able to clearly show that the benefits that we planned for were actually happening. And if you would like to see more about that evaluation, it's all still available on our website, nkc.org/armor. You can see all the data that we collected, which is much more detailed than what I've presented here. And I would encourage anyone doing a complete street project to do that detailed evaluation and then use that to consider their next steps for additional planning and engagement. And we are both happy now to take any questions that you might have about the life cycle of active transportation.
Okay, thank you both for those fantastic presentations today. I think that was really interesting to kind of take a look at some of our communities and kind of the work that they're doing, both in complete streets and for safety and multimodal expansion in there. So first off, just wanted to say thank you. We have a few questions, and please feel free to add your questions to the chat box, and I'll get to them. First question is, there's been a lot of conversation about improving methods for engagement. How did each of you collect feedback to ensure good representation? Either one of you want to take a stab first?
Well, in the planning process that we did, we thought we did a lot of outreach to the community. We sent postcards to every business along Armor Road about the project. It was in our community newsletter that goes to every resident of North Kansas City. And we even got TV coverage. We were on I forget which radio station, we were covered by one of the local news radio stations and the Kansas City Star. So we had an insane amount of just, earned media and outreach on this project. And, looking back, I'd say it was not enough. So I would say do as much as you think you can possibly do. And then, you may find that you need to do more. And that's just the reality, is that there's going to be somebody who drives through your community who feels like they have a stake in your streets, who is not going to be reached by the things you usually do. I don't know that there's a way to do it perfectly. So that's, I think one of the lessons from our project is that there's not a good way to reach every person who is ever going to drive on your street.
Laura?
Yeah, from the Westwood project, we did do a lot of public engagement, definitely offering a lot of different concept ideas and inviting the public in, not only from Westwood, but obviously from the Rosedale community, as well as inviting people over from Kansas City, Missouri, since that's one of our boundaries, but then, the business community, really asking them too, because this project in particular is right along our identified, commercial area, or one of them. And so, we were taking all that feedback along with all the information that we received from our comp plan. That was a 2-year process in and of itself, and we were part of conversations with Rosedale as they were doing their comp plan. So we were doing a lot of information and feedback gathering at that point, and as we were starting to do, move more into like our stripe only project, we were doing a lot of outreach and engagement, not only to our residents, but again, back out to our business community and letting people know that it was coming. And now we're heading back into, another evaluation phase here with our stripe only project. And so, we're definitely going to be reaching out, asking for feedback, what's working, what's not working. And we were doing this all through, again, public meetings and, engaging people through our newsletter and other social media channels and whatnot, trying to work with people at our foodie fest and things like that. So in the future, moving forward, we're definitely going to be seeking some innovative ways to be reaching out and making sure that these different stakeholders have some feedback.
Just a really quick follow-up. We had a presentation from Duran Netzel earlier in the Vision Zero Summit, Pathways to Vision Zero Summit, and in his work with Better Block KC. He and Maggie did a really fantastic presentation, which is available on our website if you would like to watch it. It's been recorded just as this one is. I was kind of curious to both of you. Did you guys try, mocking, the changes up to Armour and to 76th Street prior to construction to kind of give people a sense of like how things might be if we change things?
We did. We didn't do the whole corridor. We did just basically half a block. And it was one of the most fun community engagement days I've ever had. It was really enjoyable. We did learn a few things from doing that. Like, we learned how much people love decorative crosswalks. So we made sure to include those in our first phase of construction. But even putting that in for half a block for one day, I mean, that's not a silver bullet to getting everybody to agree about what improvements are necessary or desirable. So, but it was helpful to be able later to point out that, there were people who had been there, like, and to say, you were there and you saw it. And, it was a helpful demonstration, but not a silver bullet.
Alex,
Now you're muted, Alex.
There I go again. I was going to ask Laura, it was, with the 3 communities, unified government and Westwood and so on, did any of you do any kind of mock-up for your work on 76th Street?
So that's, kind of what we have in place right now. It feels, a little bit more than a mock-up, but we did agree to allocate funding to do this stripe only project. There were a couple of other improvements that were done that are to meet ADA compliance and whatnot. And so those are more permanent, but again, the stripe only right now is that kind of testing ground for us, that mock-up.
Awesome, thank you. Amanda, do you have a question?
Sure. So I shared the link to this project, Sarah, that you shared. And I quickly gravitated toward the crash data that you guys found on that. And given that this is the Vision Zero Summit, can you talk a little bit more, and maybe you don't have all this data prepared, but something that really jumped out with me was that injury crashes on Armour Road decreased by 24%. That is huge. So, can you talk a little bit more about that, as far as if you know like the types of crashes? If I don't want to like make it a whole thing, but yeah, just talk about kind of how that was shared, how you got there.
I don't know that I have a whole lot of detail off the top of my head. This is where it really helped us to have our engineer for this project was the one who did the crash analysis using data both from Mark and from our police department. I would say we had not planned on doing that kind of evaluation for the project. But when you do that, I think it's really powerful to be able to say, look, this is the actual data. Because one of the main complaints that we heard from people once we finished that first phase of construction was, this is not safe. You are going to kill people. And that was really, we did not enjoy hearing that, because that was never, I mean, we thought we were making this corridor safer. And being able to document that was really wonderful. There were still people who said, I don't believe your data. We just don't believe it. This feels unsafe. But nobody could say, I have different data and you're wrong. So that's why there is a very detailed memo on our website that lays out much more about the crash data and how the analysis was done. And the memo was stamped by our engineer. That's why I would say, it's great to have counts of, bicycle traffic is up, but being able to say, and crashes are down is just really powerful.
Yeah, thank you. Laura, do you guys know if you plan on doing any kind of crash analysis on your projects?
We do. 47th Street does not. There's hardly been any traffic accidents and things like that. Again, when I was bringing up the complete streets policy and kind of using some examples from feedback we had heard from, community members about putting 47th on a road diet, there was a lot of, if something's not broken, why are we fixing it kind of mentality? Because again, there wasn't really any, there was more speeding and things like that, but 47th Street had relatively very little, if any, crashes on it. So hopefully it stays that way, and we'll be able to count some other positive increases, and accidents will not be one of them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Moving on to some other questions that have popped up in the chat. Sarah, for the North Kansas City Complete Street project, was there a formal safety analysis during planning and design? And a follow-up, were you able to do a benefit cost analysis in terms of serious crash reduction prior to construction?
No, we did not really do either of those things as part of the plan. No. What's interesting, if you go and read the detailed memo, there is a more detailed cost benefit analysis that the engineer did as part of the safety evaluation, that gets into the total economic impact of the safety improvements part of this project, that I just didn't get into today. But we really didn't do that level of analysis in the planning process. We were really focused more on just making the improvements that were oriented towards pedestrians in being able to safely cross. And we didn't do the more detailed safety, the cost benefit analysis part of it.
Okay. This is a question for both of you. Someone pointed out that we see parking as a main concern for many stakeholders. Did you have issues with that on your projects? Yes.
Go ahead,
Laura,
Sarah.
you want to go first?
If you take a closer look kind of at 47th Street and the surrounding businesses, there's actually a ton of parking. So on-street parking has not truly been a part of the conversation. There was a couple of redesign options at the very beginning of doing some on-street parking and maybe some parking protected bike lanes, but with the amount of parking that we already have for the businesses in that area, it's not been so far an issue. I think the biggest complaint that I've heard, and I've only heard it once, was people were worried that the line out of Oklahoma Joe's or Joe's Kansas City, was going to spill over somehow into the street, or traffic was going to be backing up and people would be, making unsafe maneuvers because they wanted to get to Kansas City, Joe's Kansas City. So truly, it's not an issue so much around the 47th Street area.
So on-street parking in downtown North Kansas City is like sacred. And when we were planning for our complete street improvements, we really thought the adding additional on-street parking would be seen as a real positive as part of this project. And then it was like, oh yeah, that's fine. But it was not as well received as we were really expecting. I think partly because it requires you to parallel park if the other spaces are occupied. I've really learned that people in Kansas City hate to parallel park, and they hate other people parallel parking. So what's interesting to me is that the parallel parking that is being used, it's most heavily used immediately adjacent to the one residential building we have on Armour Road. We do have another building that we expect to start construction on the south side of Armour Road next to the YMCA around by the end of the year probably. And so we think that will, that the on-street parking adjacent to that is probably going to start being more heavily used once that happens. We'll get contractors in there first, and then we'll get residents in there eventually. But yeah, the parking is just, it's a constant, conversation point here, but adding more does not necessarily mean that the people will like it.
Yeah, I attended the meeting that Sarah showed on the screen earlier. I was there for the whole meeting, or for most of it. And yeah, there was a lot of calls for adjustments to be made around certain businesses or something like that. Did you guys have to kind of make any adjustments to the project after you've been laid it out, but before, where we are today?
Oh yeah. We there was one business where we converted 2 on-street parking spaces to a loading zone in front of the post office. We actually have a little extra space in front of the post office because the curb is inset a little bit. So we converted the parallel parking in front of the post office to angled and got some additional parking spaces added in there. There might be one other thing that we also took out some parallel parking and to reintroduce a right-hand turn lane in our transition zone. So we have made some minor adjustments since the first phase of construction was completed. And then, in December, we will present some options to council about some additional improvements and how we want to address the next phases to get direction from them on what happens next, whether that's minor adjustments or being able to move forward with some of the other phases of construction. But yes, we did make some adjustments last winter pretty quickly.
Awesome, thanks. Laura, follow up for you on your complete streets policy. So congratulations on getting that passed, first off. That's a major accomplishment. second of all, I'm kind of curious to know, so, I mean, I know that Westwood has, is bounded on some sides by some, some arterials or some heavily trafficked roads. I'm kind of curious to know, what was the city's approach to kind of more of those, residential streets and complete streets within Westwood? Did you guys kind of address kind of that, or were you mostly looking at the more heavily trafficked roads?
So in our comp plan, we have specific corridors, 47th being one of those that, are specifically called out for complete streets work. And so, there had already been work done on 47th, to get that feedback and have a preliminary design plan for that. For the inner streets, again, if you're not familiar with Westwood, our boundary streets that I kind of mentioned in the presentation, those are our major higher traffic streets. And so everything else is residential within Westwood. And so that's what is happening now with our Public Works Committee, is that we are kind of getting together a special focus group to help us talk about what type of activities and engagement we're looking for when these come up as an opportunity for any kind of inclusion of complete streets element.
Fantastic, wonderful, thank you. I think we have time for one more quick one. I see one here for Sarah asking, what talking points are you using now to justify the improvements as you still get questions or complaints, or have things actually simmered down now?
Things have simmered down a lot. After the second town hall, frankly, once the pandemic hit us in March, things simmered down a lot because people were staying home. So there were fewer people out driving, and I'm getting upset about Armour Road. And then once council kind of directed us to gather data and schedule the second town hall that was in September, that really helped to give people a sense of here's how I can share my feedback on this. And then I think that the meeting that they had in September was really, council was really clear on, here are all of the actual adjustments people want, where, let's be really concrete about what can be improved. And here are all the things that then staff was directed to evaluate what we could do about those things. And then we'll come back in December. So there's a real clear-cut timeframe for us addressing the concerns that have been expressed. And so I think that has helped, and I also think time has helped a little bit. There are people who have gotten used to the way the street's laid out. And I think it's helped that we clearly made some, short-term adjustments. So all of those things have helped to, I think, make people feel more comfortable with the situation.
Yeah, I think it was the shock value, or even though you had mocked it up before and people had a chance to see it, but it was new to a lot of people, and that kind of change can really motivate some folks, I guess. I think we're coming up to just about being done. There were some interesting comments that I did want to bring to the attention of everyone. We were talking about outreach. Gene Carter mentioned that in Lewisburg that they went to a high school football game to get that. So I guess it's just know your communities. Know your communities and see where you feel comfortable kind of reaching out to them. Not all communities function the same way. And also that Michael Kelly mentioned that that meeting, it was primarily folks actually in favor of the project remaining in place and not being removed. So that was a good point to make. So with these last couple seconds, I just want to once again say thank you to our speakers today. They were both fantastic, talking about the highs and lows of doing projects, active transportation projects in the area. Our next session is going to be in about half an hour, and Amanda's gone ahead and sent the link to the website. So we hope to see you there. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Great job.